My name's Mike Ellis, and I am the Global Vice President of Zalaris Consulting. With me today, I have got Greg Tonner, who joins me from Wrkr, one of our key partners. He is the head of growth and culture at Wrkr, and we've been partnering very closely with both Greg and his team over the last 12 months. Very glad to be here today to discuss obviously quite a hot topic or a topic of choice of anyone involved in payroll these days, and that's effectively Payday Super, but more importantly, in the context of preparing an SAP-based payroll to be compliant for that big event that's happening on the 1st of July of 2026. Hi, Greg, and welcome to the webinar with me today, mate.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me. Very exciting.
Excellent, great. Maybe what would be great to do just before we kick into the presentation is to maybe set the scene around why Payday Super matters to the world. And really, what we've looked at is more that employee view moving forward, and why is it important to an employee, and the everyday Australian. So if we look at sort of some of the long-standing issues that exist in the Australian super system currently, and there's some phenomenal figures here. So $6.2 billion of super remains unpaid every year, and that's according to the ATO themselves in terms of missed contributions. About 3.3 million employees are affected due to this. And really, that also translates into about $5.7 billion in missed contributions. And if we look at what that directly means to the average worker, effectively, that means that there's about $1,730 that is being, you know, each worker, each employee is affected by that amount. And if you add that up, that's a phenomenal number across the population. So the Australian government has effectively looked to address that with the introduction of what's been called Payday Super. But what does that actually mean, right? So at very high level, what does it mean? Firstly, it means that we're going to increase the payment frequency itself. So right now, most companies will be paying their superannuation quarterly, unless they've gotten ahead of the curve a bit. But in essence, legally, quarterly submissions um, is what's being done. But right, effectively moving forward from the 1st of July onwards, that's going to move to every single pay cycle. So that means that it's a much tighter execution schedule. It also means that, from a cash flow perspective, you've got to effectively make sure that you've got 12% more sitting in your cash flow to make those payments every single payday. So the execution schedule itself, or the execution window, effectively the payment has to be into the employee superannuation funds within 7 days of payday itself. And there's a much higher um, compliance requirement now. There's a lot less tolerance for errors. And we'll talk through some of those impacts as we go through today. Um, so really, to get that working, to be successful in this space, it's not just effectively being compliant, but there is a massive operational impact on being able to honour these requirements or to comply with these changes. If we look at that concept of compliance and operational execution, right? If we think about the three broad stroke areas that this is really going to be impacting here. Um, Pretty much everyone on this call, if you're a SAP payroll customer, that's you in the middle. And right now, that's the main focus that everyone has is when is my SAP payroll system going to be updated? What does that look like? And what do I need to do as an organization to get that update in place? But there is actually other changes that we do need to take into account. So there are changes coming through from the ATO in terms of how we interact and staple a employee to our organization. And then obviously in terms of the actual payments and some of the downstream impact into the clearinghouses. And you've also got some changes that are going to be required in terms of STP reporting itself. And what does that mean in terms of what that means in terms of being able to comply with those requirements. Now, if I translate that, from that sort of operational high level view into sort of an actual, so from that compliance into actual operational excellence, really there's three sort of, again, areas to look at. There's the SAP payroll foundation itself, right, which is effectively the payroll calculations, the STP and file generation itself, and really the core compliance from that internal SAP box itself. Then there is the operational shift under that Payday Super, and that's again making sure that your payroll processes are updated, that you are effectively working through those reconciliations, that you go from that quarterly reporting into that everyday payment cycle, and that you are then complying with that 7-day payment window. And really that then means that there is less tolerance for those errors, because if data is incorrect, you don't have as much time to correct it effectively. So then if we then translate that into an operational execution layer, what we want to try and do there is stop those errors or prevent those errors before the submission. So make sure that our data is more accurate, is at a high level of quality. Real-time validation. So the sooner I understand if there's a problem with my file, or the sooner I have got confirmation that my file is accepted, then I can tick a box and move on into the next step in my process. And really then that comes down to things like automated time stamping of those payments, and then having full visibility and control right the way end to end through the process, right? So if we just have a look firstly at what SAP is going to be delivering and the timelines around that. And, some of you might have seen these slides in various different formats over the last couple of weeks. But the great thing now is we absolutely have visibility of what SAP is going to deliver to the customer base, and what partners like us are gearing up to deliver into our clients, and when they're going to deliver it. So there's really three phases that they're looking at. The first phase is calculation compliance, right? So effectively making sure that when we run the payroll, that what was previously referred to as OTE is now going to be qualified earnings, that the system can handle those kinds of updates, that the calculation itself starts to calculate based off those new settings, and ultimately making sure that we can then report the qualified earnings through STP and also our SGC liability through the STP reporting as well. Now that's going to be released early May from a notes perspective, and the support pack itself will be released on the 14th of May. And by now we should all be getting prepared, understanding what wage type mappings we need to make. So from a design perspective, starting to think about that, getting to the point where we're going to start to get that applied into our systems. Got some slides later on about those specific steps. Now, phase two is effectively SAP delivering the edge cases, the more complex cases into the solution. Things like the maximum contribution base, making sure that there's alignment around the weekly base as well, and also some of the changes around thresholds. Now that's targeted at this stage to come in around August, September of this year. And again, was really focused on the calculations itself. The last piece there is really focused on data accuracy. So when an employee joins your organization, making sure that we're stapling, the employee's fund, or stapling the employee to the organization, and effectively making sure that that data accuracy is there, so that super fund integration. Now, at this point in time, from an SAP perspective, that's really a to be confirmed. Some of those specs need to be clarified by SAP and are still in the process of being validated from a product perspective, right? Now, it doesn't mean that the system's not compliant or that you can't be compliant at this very point in time, because there is a manual process that you can go through to comply with those requirements, or to tick those boxes. But the great news is that the work that we've been doing with Wrkr, and I'm going to throw over to Greg in a minute to take us through what Wrkr is, or who Wrkr is, and the solutions we have in place there. But effectively, those solutions are aimed at making sure that that phase 3 compliance requirement available to SAP customers before that 1st of July timeline. So you're not having to wait till a future date if you want to go, if you want to remove that manual process and increase your compliance and decrease your risk into the organization. Greg, really good segue now to hand over to you, mate. Would you like to take us through Wrkr and where you guys partner in this space?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So for those that don't know Wrkr, basically we're an Australian business that just specialises on compliance. Our origins start back with SuperStream back in 2007 through one of our brands called Clicks Super. We sort of service well over 3 million Aussies now. I know it's 2.9. We're well on our way to 5 million, and over 70,000 businesses touch or use Wrkr's technology. And Australia's 3 largest super funds, Aussie, Rest and Beam, Wrkr does the clearing houses for. And so that's what we are. What we're not, though, very important to say, because we just do compliance, is we are not a payroll, we're not an ERP, and we're not a HCM or HRS, or we're not success factors. We just do compliance. And what you see on this screen is our whole purpose as a company in Australia is to make compliance simpler for employers. And what's our ethos? It's all about good data and keeping bad data out. Basically, the other way we present to people, we've done all the heavy lifting, all the connections, as you can see on this screen, GMG Gateway, remember that, AFSL license, and all the other digital rights provider, the ATO, and all that other connections and accreditations. And all that sits within one platform within Wrkr, and that's what we've been partnering with Mike from Zalaris, with their rich payroll background, to bring into an SAP environment. Mike, if you go to the next page, please. And so what I want to talk about is, in the Payday Super world, basically looking at the pains or errors, we have what I would call 4 gates of error we want to eliminate or make sure our data is really good at. The first one is on the onboarding process, and I'll go through what that looks like. But really, it's about how do we get that TFN, tax deck, TFND, and how do we meet the government's requirements around super choice and super stapling, and how do we automate that? So that's gate 1, because we've got 1 to 8, 1 to 10, 1 to 12 people get that wrong every time. And if it goes into the master payroll, it creates downstream problems. And then the second part is post-payroll. The next gate is around that SAF file. And I'll show you quickly what we've offered there around visibility. But if we can check that SAF file before submitting it, then we take error out downstream. The next one, now after 7 business days to make the payment into the super account, we've got the ability to timestamp, so you know where your money is and know where that is. And then the last gate of pain is super funds have 3 days once they receive it to send back error. And so if we get a super fund return, both of the error and the amount of money, we need to understand what that error is and where that money is, so we can completely, very quickly sort of respond to it. And so that's the 4 gates of pain, as I call it. And if we get that right and we can stop error, then all our lives in payroll and compliance are going to be better. Mike, if we jump for the next one, just quickly, what we've done with Mike is how do we bring this richness of this real-time validation, for TFN. And from the TFN side, the person puts it in, we take the data that exists in SAP, and we're able to do what we call an ATO tick. And so what happens is we take that data, check with the ATO, and if the TFN's wrong, we will replace it with the one that's right. And so that's our biggest one. Then from that data, we can then have the employee fill out online and submit their tax declaration, the TFND. And that then is automated 2 heavy bits of paperwork with accuracy. And because we've done that, under the compliance rules for super stapling, we can then surface the individual stapled account if they want it. And then the last part of the success factors really is around that choice moment. So when they hit our screen, we've got if the user wants to use their last account, we can staple and surface it. If they want a choice, they can type in what they're looking for and we'll help them find the fund, or they can do a self-managed super fund, or the last option around choices, they can just use you, the employer's default. And we have that all automated, coming through. We run a dashboard that you can see where it is, but most importantly, real-time validation, accuracy, put directly into the SAP Master Payroll. So that's gate one. If I jump onto the next slide, Mike, we come to this section of post-payroll, the SAP file. And what we're able to do with our technology is we can connect you directly. The SAP file comes into our system, and we, before submission, can do two things to stop error. One, what you're seeing here on the page is if there's any error, we can surface it and we can tell you what that error is. So in the red area at the top of the page, we've noticed there's 3 errors. You can go in and you can actually see in error 1, we drop down that box that the BSB provided is not accurate. So there's been an error. And so what we can do is we can take that error, we can fix it, or we can export it and go back and change the master payroll. The other great thing here, which hasn't generally been available, is you can do a partial file. So you've got 1,000 employees and 10 are wrong, so you've got 990 that are accurate. You can actually identify the ones you don't want to send through, which are the ones in red, the error here, and all the others will go through, and then you can quickly go back and change. So that takes a lot of pressure off us in payroll of holding back the whole file of 1,000 with the 7 business days to get it acted happening. And then we might go to the next slide, and this is around payments, right? This is ability that we're able to, because we both submit the messaging and submit the payments, we're able to tell you on a timestamp where you are in the process. So what you see on this slide within our dashboard is in relation to that sort of payment of that batch or that group of employees, you can see each stage through to the contributions sent to the fund, and that's timestamped. And so that gives us a lot of confidence in the environment to know where our money is at all time. The other option within our platform, working through with Mike and Zalaris to SAP, is we have multiple payment options, whether that's direct debit, EFT, BPay, and shortly MPP. So there's multiple options all contained in the one network, and that's where we are on payment, which then leads us to our next pain point, and that's super funds have 3 days. We go to the next slide, Mike. Super funds have 3 days if they find an error in what we've submitted to return it to us. So what we've been able to do on the platform, number one is notification. You'll get an email. Secondly, if you go into the platform, there'll be notifications there. And if you go into the batch, it will actually show on the timestamp a refund, what you saw on the previous page. And that you'll be able to click and come to this error report, which will show the contribution at the top. And then in this case, Albert Einstein, you can actually see what the error is, and they can't find the member. We know a lot of people change super and don't tell us. But the other really important point here from reconciliation is that there's a PRN you should see at the bottom of that screen, is we're able to identify that refund back in your account. So you can very quickly identify the error here, correct it, find where the money is in the account, and then you can submit payments. And so that's, I just want to run through these 4 areas of functionality that will help operational excellence that you can do today, and what we're building with Mike for, SAP Cloud, for on-prem, there's a pathway, and if a hybrid, so you can be Payday Super ready by the 1 July. But I'll throw back over to Mike now.
Thanks, Greg. So I think if we look at the landscape out there, SAP Payroll covers quite a large, there's a fair few variations of it out there, right? But 3 broad stroke categories that they fit into. You've got full cloud, which is really that sort of success factors, employee central payroll approach. And, with that situation, right now there is seamless SAP native integration. We can do the real-time validation. There's end-to-end compliance beyond your sort of payroll calculations as well, right? You've then got hybrid, which is really, again, employee central as your core HR platform. But in those situations, customers potentially still have SAP on-premise or a RISE solution for the payroll engine itself, right? Now, in that situation, again, all of that lovely front-end portal from an employee central perspective is available to the customers. All that validation through that rich user experience is there, and also that sort of downstream compliant payment as we call it from an SAP perspective. The on-premise world, obviously, the user experience from on-premise world is slightly different. But having said that, the approach that we've taken actually still provides compliance layer it still provides the ability to leverage the great portal that Wrkr had developed that you've just seen a couple of sample screens of. And ultimately, the main point here is that you can still benefit from, this automated approach rather than having to still remain in a manual, sort of not integrated world itself, right? So that's really a key point that we've taken forward as we've looked to develop these solutions to the SAP customer base. Um, Now, if we look at, what that means, right? So before you had a manual process out to the ATO, and you had, the downstream file into the clearinghouse without those sort of real-time benefits that Greg has called out. Effectively, there's two solutions that we've brought into play here. Now, Worker Ready is effectively that data quality compliance layer that Greg spoke about around making sure the TFM is correct, enabling that stapling action, and that effectively has a real-time integration into the ATO. Really, really nice and user friendly, and real-time compliance of your data itself. Um, and then you've got the actual downstream payments itself, and that's really where Worker Pay comes into play, where you have that real-time visibility of the payroll of the superannuation payments going out, and all that lovely auditability that Greg mentioned in those previous slides and the pain points that we're resolving, and all of that's fully integrated into the clearinghouse itself. Greg, have you got any comments around that slide, mate? I'm really excited about this overall landscape, by the way, because it just removes that complexity.
Yeah, Mike, look, I think what we've been able to do is you've been able to bring the richness of the Wrkr platform directly into that SAP environment for all users. And so all that heavy lifting's done. And, we've got, obviously you as a specialist in payroll, but also, we're also standing up Wrkr in the SAP store. So I think we're going to have something that can, we've got your back, right? We know this is going to be huge. And we know that there's so much work that every payroll is just doing just to get ready from the sort of internal engineering for payroll through the OTE changes, that we've got this sort of operational stuff ready to go. And so, I think it's a really nice, simple way to talk about something that's very complex.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that's important to note is our integration really does emphasize that concept of Payday Super, because it's actually built into the payroll control center itself, right? So it's just a step in your payroll. It's effectively the mindset that we've taken. If we look at sort of how Wrkr does integrate with the SAP ecosystem, so Greg did mention that it is going to go onto the store. We've taken a very, very open view that it shouldn't be limited to just Zalaris customers. We are looking to effectively make this available to all of the SAP ecosystem. And the idea here is that you can access it directly once it's installed into your environment. You should be able to access it directly from the portal itself, from the Employee Central, for example. We will have single sign-on set up so that as you click through into the Wrkr portal itself, it's role-based and make sure that you're validated. And again, that whole user experience where you can navigate straight into the Wrkr platform, I think just reduces the friction of being able to make sure that you're compliant and that you're adhering to those process changes in a timely manner. Yeah. So that's pretty. I'm pretty excited to see that in action. Now, if we think about sort of a call to action here, and preparation and execution is obviously critical to success here, right? So at this very point in time, we are, we have enough visibility to understand the design changes that SAP are going to bring through in that first drop in May, and also then potentially what's coming in that August drop. So at this point in time, what we're recommending to all of our customers is firstly, start to review what those design impacts are on your existing setup and your existing configuration. To understand your existing OTE mapping, start to validate that, and also then check to see, okay, are these wage types, or do we need to add other wage types to then what will effectively be qualified earnings, and make sure that those design changes are understood, documented, effectively signed off internally, so that when we get to the point in that early May period where the updates are deployed from SAP via that support pack, your configuration team can crack on and actually get that config in a timely manner. And the reason why you want to do that is because you want to start regression testing, right? Firstly, making sure that it's going to meet the actual calculation requirements once you set it up, but that it also, from a regression testing perspective, is going to work as well. I'd encourage everyone to have a think about things like testing retrospective payments and back payments as well, and what does that do to your files, right? So keeping that in mind as you're going through that testing. And then really then looking at, okay, from an operational perspective, right, what do I need to do to change my payroll process itself? So making sure that, I'm running that super file on Payday itself and sending that downstream. If you have to fund the bank account before you do that, make sure that you're telling your treasury function that, hey, I need an extra 12% from this day forward, things like that. So making sure you assess that and that you've got that underway. And then, we're encouraging partners to help sort of, if you can't handle some of that work yourself, work with partners to understand those scope gaps and really accelerate that readiness as well. Right? It's a big change. It's not easy. There's schema changes that are going to be required. There's table changes that are going to be required. There's program changes that are going to be required. And in that front, you're going to have configuration experts. You're going to have a technical expert. And a payroll process person as well to help guide through this. So I think it's an exciting time. I'm super excited to be partnering with Greg. Excuse the pun, Greg, on that one. But very excited to partner with Wrkr and the team to bring the solution to market. And yeah, happy to be here to help partners and clients as we move forward. So with that, I think there may be a couple of questions that have come in as we've gone through this. Greg, I'm just going to pop into the Q&A to see what we have, and we can go from there. I will just stop sharing my screen.
Perfect.
Just bring us back so it's just the both of us now. There we go.
Well, better.
So there we go. Well, I don't know. It depends on who you're talking to. Firstly, there's a question that's coming around the product itself, the SAP product. Can you confirm what SAP are doing from a product perspective 1st July and what they haven't catered for? So we had that slide earlier where we talked about those 3 phases. I think the answer there is really focusing on calculation compliance for that 1st July timeline. That's going to be released in May, right? And really the phase 3 component of that data validation piece is still to be confirmed, right? Again, great opportunity to potentially look at a solution like Wrkr if that's a risk factor that companies aren't willing to bear from a manual workaround perspective. So that's something to consider. Okay, let me just have a look at another question here. This one's an interesting one. So can I buy or split the solution? So I'm assuming that means, can I buy Wrkr Pay or Wrkr Ready separately, or do I have to buy them together? Greg, is that something that you guys have had a view on?
Yeah, Mike, I mean, you can buy them individually. They fit together, just what you need. And we'll work with each one of the SAP customers to work out what they need, where their risk is when they look at it. What we have seen is once you see the richness of the fact, the way you've constructed it, so it just feels SAP, it lets the SAP user work in their system they know. I think that's really important. And then, the onboarding piece, pre-payroll into payroll, the front end. And then, of course, some organizations may stage it, and the back end from Super, that rich, audit functionality. We'll help people buy it in pieces or do it at once, whatever it takes, I think, to make sure people are ready for 1 July.
Okay, cool. That's a really good overview on life. Like the ability to collaborate there. Here's an interesting one. When do I need to update my payroll itself? So obviously the answer that we would typically give our customers is start as early as possible. So again, as I said, start that now, and then get ready when the support pack is going to be released. Obviously, if you're not up to the minimum support pack that's available right now, get there as quickly as possible so that you've just got that last pack to go when it gets released in May. Um, I think the one thing to watch out for is sort of date of effectiveness, right? So obviously you've heard us say 1st of July is when it's applicable. Payday Super comes in 1st of July. The thing to be very mindful of is it's actually your pay date itself that will determine the effective start date of when you're meant to be compliant with this. So even if your pay period starts in June, but the pay date itself falls in July, you have to be compliant from that pay date in June. So if you've got a fortnightly or bi-weekly payroll that starts, you know, 15th of June, but your pay date falls into July, you've got to be compliant with qualified earnings calculations and whatnot in that June sort of date itself. So I think that's something to be mindful of.
Right. Yep.
And yeah, that I believe we verified that, Greg, earlier today. So
That's right,
yeah,
Mike.
off.
That's the trap, right? So if you pay on the 29th, 30th of June, but the cash hits 1 July, because the cash hits 1 July, you'll be deemed to have to do Payday Super from that payment run.
Yep. So that's all the qualified earnings, the reporting of it, the STP, all of that starts from that date. So I think that's a very distinguishing point there. Okay, I love this question. It gets straight to the point. Availability and purchasing. So how do I buy this solution? Greg, do you want to answer that one, mate?
Yeah, look, this is what we want to do. We've been in compliance a long time. This is about getting people ready. So we are the Wrkr platform. If you're on Prem and you've talked about that example Mike gave, we can work with you today. Even if you're on cloud and you can't get there, there is ability with Mike's help and with SAP to connect directly into the UI. So don't be panicked that I can't get my cloud done in time or I've got to do too much work on my payroll. We have worked with Mike and his expertise and team to be able to connect that. From a cloud perspective, with everything sort of complete, we're just on the verge of completing the SAP with Mike and his team, building that ready for store. So we hope to have that launch ready sort of mid-May, early June. But as I said, I just really encourage people, if this is something you're interested, let us scope it now, because there are multiple ways to make sure you're ready from day one, which might mean API comes down or you had other priorities that you can support your payroll team to, have this extra functionality that's not going to, lets them stay ahead, not deal with, not knowing what's happening.
Yeah, and obviously different risk appetite for organisations. If you've got lots of new hires that come in, that data collection becomes a lot more. The timeliness of that becomes a lot more important. So things that we can look at as well. Okay, so look, I think just mindful of time, I think we've kind of come to the end of that. Any sort of finishing statements you want to make there, Greg, before we ring off?
No, Mike, I think, SAP is a phenomenal system. A lot of people invested in. I think we've been able to bring something to SAP that really just strengthens the SAP relationship. And, they're working hard, and this is the biggest change we've seen in so many years. And I think, this lets SAP customers be a step ahead of what's happening. But just want to thank you and Zala bringing this to life.
Look, it's great. We've really enjoyed working with the team. So encourage anyone, if you've got any questions, to reach out. If you'd like to see more of the solution, please reach out to us. We're happy to help get there as quickly as possible. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone.